What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Survivor Encore presented by the Russell Hantz Show. As you can see, I'm here by myself tonight. So I'm going to be watching the comments box very closely. Please feel free to chime in, and you can be my special guest tonight in the comment section. I'm happy to include you in the show. So make sure that you're commenting, you're staying engaged, and while you're at it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below. Give our video a thumbs up. Let us know that you like the content that you're seeing. That way we can keep making it for you. We're going to start off tonight. We are talking about episodes 9, 10, and 11 of Survivor Borneo, and we're getting ready to wrap up this first season. It won't be much longer before we are moving on to season 2, which is Australia. I'm really excited about that because as we get going, I think that the episodes kind of get better as time goes on. So here we are, still working on Borneo. Thanks for everybody who's just joining us. I see we got some viewers just popping in right now. Like I said at the start of the video, I'm here by myself tonight. I don't have any special guests. So y'all are my special guests. Hit me up in the comments section and be part of the conversation. I want to hear from you guys. So starting off with episode 9 of Borneo tonight, we're starting to really see Jeff kind of come into his Survivor role. He's using a lot of common terms that we see on Survivor now, and he's just getting more comfortable facilitating the show. There's a few times, and I noted it a few times in these episodes that we just watched, 9, 10, and 11. There's a few times that it seems that he's a little more compassionate in these episodes, probably than he is in modern day Survivor. You know, we talked about that early in the season where he was offering to let people stay at tribal council because it was raining out. Now we're up here further. He's checking on people. The first challenge that we saw in episode 9 was a ropes course that had 16 legs. And the whole time, if you listen to Jeff's commentary, it's just straight up encouragement. It's not the announcer style Jeff Probst that we're used to seeing today. It's really just like, stay in there, you're doing a great job, and all of this stuff. Um, really different than what we see today. Today's Jeff Probst is, oh, we got Dr. Phil in the house. Look at that, how cool. So today's Jeff Probst, not quite what we would hear from him now. Prior to the challenge, we start to see Kelly Wigglesworth a little bit. The whole concept of being an alliance is really eating at her. She doesn't think that it's a good thing to do. She thinks it makes her a bad person. She's just not buying into it. Rich and Sue are on her tail. They know that this is happening. People are trying to pull some stuff in together. And, Rich kind of is under the impression he's still kind of living off from his legacy of being the guy that catches the fish. He feeds the tribe, right? So that's what we see. At the reward challenge that we just talked about, the ropes course, it was pretty fast-paced, 16 legs, but they didn't show us the whole challenge. Obviously, that would be very difficult to do. So we see that throughout the challenge, Kelly maintains a pretty strong lead, but Colleen's right there on her tail. At the end, Colleen takes home the win, and the reward for this challenge is an American barbecue and letters from home. And it was funny because in the beginning, right before the challenge started, Jeff made sure to let Jenna know that she did in fact have a letter from home, because we saw in the last set of episodes that we watched, they got the videos from their families. Jenna was left out. For whatever reason, her family wasn't able to get it in time. But she did get a letter in time, so that was great. Colleen has to choose somebody to go with her, so naturally she chooses Jenna because of the situation with the video, and that was really sweet of her to do. Jenna obviously appreciated it very much, became very emotional, and that's that. We also see that it's Richard's birthday in episode 9. I think he was turning 39 years old. What's going on, Cheesecake? He's turning 39 years old and walking around naked for the day, as Richard Hatch does. That's kind of his stake in the Survivor game. He's the first naked guy running around, and that's how he wants to spend his birthday. It does cause a little bit of tension. Some people aren't so comfortable with it. Jenna's not really comfortable with it. Colleen's not really comfortable with it. So ultimately he decides to stop doing it, but it's Richard Hatch. That's what Richard Hatch does, right? The tree male, their next challenge is going to be a battle of wit, and that's pretty much all it says. So the tree male clues about the challenges that are coming up are starting to get a little bit more cryptic. Like you have to analyze it a little bit more than some of the earlier clues that they were getting in tree mail. Some of the earlier ones were pretty much like you're gonna use these materials, you're gonna build a litter, and then you're gonna carry somebody out of the woods. These ones, they're starting to get a little bit more poetic, and you have to kind of dig in a little bit to see what's going on. So it's more of what we see in today's Survivor in terms of tree mail. Um, Sean starts talking about his alphabet strategy also before the challenge starts. And it's interesting that he does because we're going to see coming up in a few minutes how that plays out and how that doesn't age very well, his alphabet strategy. Uh, Jenna's making jokes that she's going to start going by the name Zelda because she knows that she is who he will be voting for tonight. Kelly makes a point to Sean about how, or makes a point that Sean says people shouldn't be in alliances, but then he's going out voting people out alphabetically. Jervis doesn't agree with this strategy. Pretty much nobody on the tribe agrees with his strategy. There's really no strategy to it as far as if you were to ask me. It's kind of basic. It's just an easy way for him to skate around having to put somebody's name down and hurt somebody's feelings, which is what he's trying to do. And he kind of alludes to that later in the episode that he just doesn't want to upset people, so that's why he does it. They get to the immunity challenge. They're all standing on squares, flipping their squares over as they go. This is a challenge that we see again in later seasons. It's not the first time that it happens, but it's the first time that we see it on Survivor, and it's the first time that the contestants that are playing in this season see it as well. So the challenge is a little bit fast-paced, and a lot of the challenges that we've seen so far this season, they don't spend a lot of time showing us any of the dramatics of the challenge or any parts where they just kind of fast forward through it like it's a quick part of the game nobody really cares about, so we're just going to skip over this part. Um, Again, we see this is one of the funniest parts for me is Jeff Probst, because I think it's hilarious that he continues to call the immunity necklace the talisman. And he doesn't call that anymore. Modern day survivors, the immunity necklace, and we're all very familiar with it. But here in this first season, he keeps calling it the talisman, which I think is funny. And I think that it's one of those things that makes me think a little bit about what would happen if that name had caught on instead of the immunity necklace. It just doesn't seem to fit. Like, it's not Survivor. It's kind of strange. Maybe that's my own personal opinion, but that's what I think about it for sure. Ultimately, Rudy wins this immunity challenge, which does require a little bit of wit. You have to plan where you're going to step. They step on the square. Once they move to the next square, they flip it over. Once the square is flipped over, they can no longer use it as a stepping stool. And Rudy ends up winning the challenge. You see Jenna trying to give him some advice. Jervis is kind of giving him opposite advice. So it's funny, and it's a little bit strategic in the sense that, you know, those two clearly have competing goals in terms of getting Rudy to the next spot. So that was interesting to see. He takes home the immunity necklace. So go Rudy. You can be 70-something years old and still play Survivor. Rudy is a shining example of that for sure. If you're just joining us, don't forget to hit us up in the comments section. Give the channel a subscribe and a thumbs up for the video as we continue through episodes 9 through 11 of Survivor Borneo. That's what we're talking about right now. See, there's a bunch of you on there, so I just wanted to make sure everybody was caught up. So we get back to the Ratana tribe. Jenna and Colleen, they're just kind of hanging out in the hammocks, and they're pretty much saying, you know, we're two of the last ones of the Pagong tribe. I think the writing is on the wall for us, and they've just kind of come to terms with it. They're not scrambling around. They're not trying to change anybody's minds. And it's funny for me to see that because you don't see that in today's Survivor. If you thought you were on the bottom, most good players, and I'm not trying to insinuate that these girls weren't good players. This is the first time that anybody's ever done this show. But, you know, now that we're back up at season 40, if your name's on the chopping block, you're not just sitting in the hammock thinking, "Woe is me, you know, I'm getting voted out. I don't know what to do." You're scrambling around, you're talking to people, you're trying to get people on your side to vote with you in your voting block. So it's funny to see that they're just kind of hanging out. They're having a good time with it. They're laughing and joking. Um, they do start talking about pulling an alliance together a little bit later. They spent that time on the hammock. You know, this sucks for us. And then they start talking about forming an alliance because it's the writing is kind of on the wall for everybody else. That you've got Rudy, uh, Rich, Sue, and Kelly. They don't really know that Kelly's kind of she's uncertain that she's going to continue with this alliance, but it's becoming more and more clear to the tribe that those guys are working together. They're working in an alliance, and that in order for them to survive, the rest of the Pagong tribe and Sean, correction, Sean's already voted out. So oh no, he's not. He's here. So the rest of the Pagong tribe and Sean, in order for them to survive, they have to form an alliance of their own. They have to form a counter alliance, right? Um, Colleen and Jenna talk about pulling in Jervis. Jervis he seems to be on board with the idea. He's seen the writing on the wall. He knows what's going on. And then we see a spot, and this spot really stood out to me in this first episode where Colleen and Jenna, they're just having fun on the beach. They're having a little bit of a fashion show, and Kelly wants to join in with them. But as soon as Kelly starts participating in this little fashion show with Colleen and Jenna, it really raises the flags of Richard and Sue, who are now saying, it looks like she's, you know, she may be defecting. I'm not sure how loyal she is anymore. You know, it's really raised their flags. And we see in Kelly's confessionals that she's feeling that way also. She's not on board with the alliance idea. She doesn't like having to vote people out, you know, as a group and ganging up on somebody. That's just not, it's not how she wants to play the game. She thinks it takes all the fun out of it. And she looks really dismal in her confessionals also. But so she's joining them. It's got her kind of on the radar with Rich and Sue. Really, what Rudy is worried about, because Rudy's part of this same alliance with Rich and Sue and Kelly, what Rudy is worried about is that they're going to form a all-female alliance. He thinks that they have the numbers that they could do that, and they could be a strong alliance. In his mind, they won't have the foresight to do it. And I'm not going to use the same verbiage that Rudy uses for obvious reasons, but in Rudy's mind, they won't have the foresight to make an all-female alliance. And so he thinks that even though it's a concern, he's probably pretty safe with it. Jenna, Colleen, and Jervis commit to all voting for Richard, and ultimately they do. We head off to tribal council, and when Robbie was on with me during one of the first episodes, it was funny because he mentioned the gong on the way into tribal council. And in the first few episodes, I didn't notice it. And that might be because I don't think that they put audio on it like they do now. But we're still seeing when they come into tribal council now, they're ringing this gong on the way in. And it's funny because it's just such a senseless task that they do on the way. I'm sure it was for the effect of the show and being on a desert island. But it's kind of silly. It's kind of a silly thing that they do. But they go in, they're ringing the gong. Jeff starts explaining to them how the jury works. We have Greg, who was voted out previously, and he's going to be the first member of the jury. So Jeff's explaining to the castaways and to us as viewers how the jury works, because again, this is season 1. Nobody's ever seen it. Nobody knows what's happening. He gives us that explanation. And then Jeff starts asking his questions, and Jeff is doing so much better in tribal council asking his questions. He's really starting to be comfortable talking to the castaways. I feel like he's gotten to know them a little better. Maybe that helps. And he just knows what kind of questions to ask. He starts right out of the gate with Rich about being nude on his birthday. And, you know, to Rich, he's like, I like being naked. It's not a big deal to me, but it made some people uncomfortable. So I decided against it. I stopped doing it. Probably a good answer for Rich to give, especially in a tribal council setting. Then Jeff starts asking Sean about his alphabetical method for voting. Like, why are you voting in this way? Sean explains it like it gives him an order that he follows, and it makes it so that, oh goodness, what did he say? It gives him an order that he follows, and he tries to paint the picture as if it's strategic in some way. Um, he just wants to. He thinks that a lot of the Pagong tribe alphabetically are in the beginning, a lot of the Tagi are at the end of the alphabet in terms of where their names fall. So in his mind, it's strategic because he's still voting for Pagong members, even though he's an original Tagi. So he's voting for Pagong members. He thinks that that's some sort of strategy. I'm not so convinced that that's necessarily the case. Then Jeff asks, he wants to know how important is Rich right now. He seems to be the only one that can catch fish. And Sue and the girls were really excited about this question because they had caught a fish earlier that day. They tell Jeff and Richard, you can hear Richard make a comment in the background, something to the effect of, yeah, my time here is done. I'm not needed anymore. And but the girls caught a fish. They gave it to Richard for his birthday. They get voting. The 4-person Toggy Alliance sticks together. They vote out Jenna. And Richard, Colleen, Jervis, and Jenna stick to their mini alliance that they just formed. They go after Richard. Ultimately, Sean gets 1 vote from Kelly. Kind of a random vote there. And so Jenna's ultimately the one voted out. So behind the scenes, episode number 9, some fun facts for you guys. After Jenna was voted out, we talked about how during the family videos that she didn't have her video in. So after she was voted out, she did end up getting her videotape from her family. So there's some good news. You can rest easy about that. Richard Hatch, this kind of is a milestone for Survivor, and it's really easy for these guys in season 1 because they're the first people to ever play. So they kind of set a lot of firsts as they went. But Richard Hatch becomes the first person to ever celebrate his birthday on Survivor. Colleen Haskell became the first female to ever win an individual challenge. Rudy became the oldest person to win individual immunity. Jervis Peterson. Oh, here's a funny editorial note that doesn't happen very often. Usually Jeff takes back the immunity necklace before the challenge starts. And in this particular case, Jervis was actually still wearing the immunity necklace while the immunity challenge was going. So Jeff forgot to take the necklace back from him. That's your fun stuff for episode 9. And we are moving on to episode number 10. Episode 10 is all out of whack in my notes. Episode 10, we see a reward challenge towards the beginning of the episode where the reward is going to be a phone call home and a slice of hot pizza delivered by helicopter. What we haven't seen yet, or what I haven't talked about yet, also is earlier in the episode, Jervis got some tree mail. It was a piece of parchment and a cigar. He became a father while he was out playing Survivor. He had his 4th child. A son was born while he was out in Borneo playing Survivor. So he received a cigar and got that news by parchment. They get to the reward challenge and find out the reward will be a phone call home, a hot slice of pizza delivered by helicopter, obviously for dramatic effect. Otherwise, Jeff would have brought it with him, right? So it was an interesting challenge because it was a very small platform that was built, right? They have to stand on this platform where, let me see. Nope, this one is the bamboo poles. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead to the next episode. So this one, they're racing. They're on a platform. They have bamboo poles set up. They're racing to different legs, and the fastest people to get to the next leg move on. Ultimately, it comes down to Jervis and Rich. And again, it's just a fast-paced challenge. It's one-dimensional. There's one aspect to it. There's not a lot of extra that goes into it. They get out. They're racing on the bamboo. It comes down to Rich and Jervis at the final leg. And to me, it looked a little bit... Jervis did get there first. Rightfully, Jervis got there first. It almost looked a little bit to me like Rich might have backed off slightly to to let Jervis get to the end, probably because of the news that he got that morning that his son was born. So a phone call home is kind of a nice reward. If you just had a baby, you want to call home, check on his significant other and the child. I think that Richard kind of passed him on that one a little bit. They go back to the Ratana tribe. He doesn't get to call right there after the challenge, mostly because the time in New Jersey, according to Jeff, was 3 a.m. So in order to prevent him calling in the middle of the night, wasting the phone call, and potentially not getting an answer, they postpone it until the next day when the time matches up a little bit better. Rudy makes a really funny quote. They go back to the Ratana tribe. They're hanging out at camp, and Rudy makes a really funny quote. It just kind of stood out to me because it's so Rudy. He says, 10 more days, this will all be over. I'll probably never see these people again. And so for me, I'm thinking, he's going to get all sad and mopey, like, I actually like him. I'm probably going to miss him. And he just follows it up with, that's the way I want it. Doesn't ever want to see these people again. That's just Rudy. That's how he is. He's a funny guy. He's a really funny guy like that. Jervis gets the opportunity to make a phone call. And there was a lot of conversation while he was gone making his phone call that was really interesting because it was a lot of people discussing having children out of wedlock. Like it was this great big deal. And I understand this was 20 years ago. Maybe stuff was different 20 years ago. I'm only 31 years old, but I guess I don't remember 20 years ago being that much different, where sometimes there are families where people aren't married, but everybody seems to be making kind of a big deal out of it. Like it's a huge deal that he has 4 children and he's unmarried. Not a big deal to me. I'm not really sure what it was, but that just stood out to me that they spent so much time discussing that. They bring us back to Kelly. Kelly's still struggling with the alliance structure. She really doesn't want to be part of this alliance. So we may see in the future where she jumps ship. We'll have to stay tuned and find out. She makes a comment that making a deal with Rich is like making a deal with the devil. And you really can see, now that this season has gone on more, earlier when we're watching the early episodes, I'm like, there's so many people doing strategic things. I don't understand why Richard gets so much credit. But now that this season has gone on a little bit more, I'm definitely seeing Richard's strategy, his strategic gameplay, and his strength. I think that he definitely deserves the credit that he gets in terms of being an early pioneer of Survivor and being a person who was kind of the pioneer of a lot of things that we know to be in Survivor today. That doesn't mean, I'm not trying to say that means these things would never happen. Like there would never have been alliances if it wasn't for Richard Hatch. There would never have been any sort of strategy if it wasn't for Richard. That's not what I'm trying to say, because somebody would have came along that's just as smart as Richard, played the game, formed alliances, worked on strategy. It would have happened no matter what. I'm part of some Survivor groups on Facebook, and in one of them the other day, somebody's like, oh, if Richard Hatch didn't win season 1, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the season before, if Richard Hatch didn't win season 1, Survivor would have only gone 8 or 9 seasons. And I don't really understand that train of thought. I don't think, like I said, I think that Richard was a good Survivor player, and maybe he really helped season 1 take off because he was one of the more captivating players there. Absolutely. So maybe he helped him get to season 2. I don't know. I feel like their ratings would have been high no matter what because it was so new. They would have moved on to season 2, and we definitely would have seen this strategy and alliances pop up without Richard. Like I said, I'm not trying to discredit him, but I'm also not going to say that Survivor as we know it today wouldn't be the same without Richard Hatch, because I think it still would have evolved here no matter what. Tree Mail includes a tiki torch with a note, and the note says that sunset is a time for them to head to the beach, which indicates a nighttime challenge, which we really don't see very much anymore. And I think that might be, just from a production standpoint, it's probably really hard to film at night, particularly in places where you just can't get good lighting. And we see when this challenge starts, it's not night, but it's sunset, and that can make it very hard for filming. So I think that's probably why we don't see too many of these challenges before, but we don't see too many of these challenges anymore, but we have seen them previous to this one. There was the scavenger hunt challenge where they were bringing back the knife and the can opener and the helmet. So we've seen some night challenges. It's probably a production nightmare, a filming nightmare. So the challenge ends up being a fire making challenge, which is really cool because that's your bread and butter of Survivor. It's a Final Four tiebreaker now, and making fire is a huge part of being on Survivor. So it's a fire making challenge. They have 3 minutes to go out, collect as much driftwood as they can, bring it back to their stand, stack it up. They can stack it as high as they want, but it cannot touch the rope that they have to burn. Once that is done, so the part that was funny to me is that they're given that 3 minutes to collect it, and then they all kind of reset. They stop. Everybody gets back online, and they wait, and then they go out, get their fire from torches that are out in the ocean. So they've got their little torch, and they go out and light it from another torch in the ocean and bring it back. For me, it's interesting because I would think that they would want to just do it so like the players get to pick how much time they spend collecting wood and making a pile before they go out and get fire, because it adds an extra element to the challenge. Do you invest your time collecting wood and building a pile, or do you just get a pile that's going to burn quick and run out and get your fire? It changes things a little bit. So it was an interesting challenge. Jervis definitely had some trouble with his. He went out, he lit his torch, got halfway back, it went out, he goes back out, and here's Jeff again with his super supportive comments. Don't worry, buddy, you've got plenty of time, Jervis, keep moving. In today's Survivor, it'd be like, Jervis's torch goes out. You got to run back out and relight it. You have got to dig, Jervis. You are falling behind in this challenge. That's not what we heard at all. It's just, you've got time, buddy. Keep going. So it's just a different Jeff that we see in season 1 of Survivor. There's no doubt about that. Jervis comes back his second time. His torch goes out again. Really bad luck on his part. So people start lighting their fires, getting it going, and Richard just takes off. I don't know what he put in his pile of wood, but Richard lit his fire and it was gone. He had immunity. He burnt through his rope almost immediately, and it was done. So we get back to the Ratana tribe. Jervis and Colleen are trying to get Sean and Kelly to vote with their newly formed alliance. They're trying to pull together because they know that they have to do something, especially since Jenna was voted out in the last tribal council, which is in large part because of Sean's alphabet method. So right now it's a really good time to go to Sean to try to convince him to become part of their alliance, bring him in, hopefully get a different voting strategy for him, because this alphabet situation is just not working whatsoever. He realizes, Jervis, I think it was Jervis, realizes at that point that they need to get Kelly to be part of their alliance, which I'm not sure how much they know about how uncomfortable she is in her current alliance, but I do think that she might have been willing to switch over into the other alliance if it were presented to her the right way. Storm blows in. Everybody is stuck together on the beach, so there's not a lot of conversations that can happen because they're all kind of, stuck together in their shelter. And like I said, this is the part of the season where we are finally starting to see people think, and the wheels are turning. The wheels are turning. They're not quite on the level of today's Survivor, but the wheels are turning. We're starting to see some strategy. So that's that. We go to Tribal Council to Sean. Jeff is asking a question. Got to revisit the alphabet program. What's going on with that? And at that point, Sean pretty much says, he was devastated by Jenna getting voted out. He knows that in part it was because of his alphabet program, and he's not going to do it anymore. He's going to vote his conscience, which is good. Playing the game a little bit better in that case. Jeff asks Kelly, what's her voting strategy? And of course, she doesn't want to be part of the alliance, but she's not stupid. She's not going to out the alliance at tribal council. She's not going to broadcast it right there with the rest of her alliance sitting next to her. So she just says, my vote's going based on competition and who's pissing me off. And that might not have even been a lie, because we saw in a confessional that she talks about needing to separate herself from the alliance, but not like in their face about it. She's going to be subtle about it. She's going to do her own thing, but she's not going to come right out and tell them, I'm not going to be in your alliance anymore. Ultimately, Jervis is voted out at this tribal council. And, you've got the Toggy Four and Sean voting for him. So that was interesting that Sean voted with them. But then you see Colleen and Jervis voted for Sean. So I guess he didn't have a choice but to vote for them with them. Behind the scenes of episode 10, Jervis Peterson's elimination, Colleen becomes the first player to be the last remaining member of a tribe. Colleen is the last remaining member of the Pagong tribe now that Jervis is out. So another survivor record in that sense. Moving on to episode 11. It is the 31st day of Survivor. So they're getting close. It's 39 days. Back in season 1, it's 39 days now. That has not changed throughout these seasons. By Kelly's account, Rich and Sean are getting weak and crabby. Everybody's hungry. Things at camp just aren't, they're not all happy-go-lucky. Poor Colleen, I don't know if you guys saw this, but she, like, her legs are literally just covered in sores and scratches. They look terrible. They look like maybe they're infected. I don't know. It looks really bad. And Colleen is also showing her strategic mind in the beginning of this episode. And it was cool to see because she's been paying attention to Rich and Sue and how Rich and Sue are walking around and talking to different groups of people and the different promises that she's making to all of them. And Colleen's got this all figured out in her mind. She's following them around mentally. She knows what's going on. So she's trying to work out a strategy for how to deal with this. It was just nice to see some really good strategic thought from Colleen. And part of me wonders, maybe we didn't get to see that part of Colleen before because she was so connected to Greg, and Greg was such a dominating player in the sense that I don't know that he spent a lot of time asking her what her opinion was. I think maybe he just kind of told her what he wanted her to think. So it's really nice to see Colleen free of Greg and thinking now, because we're really starting to see just how intelligent she is as a player. She's picking up on this other stuff. Tree Mail comes around. It's for a reward challenge. It's going to be a Survivor trivia game, and it consists of one winner being able to spend the night on a yacht with a luxury dinner, clearly sponsored by Visa. So we've talked about on the show before, we've talked about how when season 1 of Survivor, or when the Survivor concept came to be, when Mark Burnett went to pitch Survivor to different networks, nobody wanted to pick up the show. Nobody thought the idea of dropping all of these castaways off, all these people, 16, 20 people, whatever. Nobody thought that was a good idea to just drop them off on an island. It was either too much for liability or nobody's going to watch it. So no networks wanted to fund it. Season 1 of Survivor was funded almost entirely by sponsorship. We saw a Target sponsorship. We've seen Visa. It was actually in episode 10. Dr. Scholl's had a little plug in there for shoe inserts. And that part is funny because we're going to see that, I think, on Wednesday's episode. This week, Wednesday, we're going to be wrapping up Borneo. We're going to start talking about season 2, Survivor Australia. Will start next Sunday at 8 p.m. But this Wednesday at 8 p.m., we're going to wrap up the last 2 episodes of Borneo and the finale. And during that episode, I'm going to show you a clip, a video clip. I have it all cut and whatever. It's really good. It's an interview with Jeff Probst, and he is talking to Dean from season 39. And he's telling a story about Richard Hatch, something that happened this season. And I want you guys to see it because I think that it's funny. It's a funny story. But he also talks about Dr. Scholl's, and he imitates Mark Burnett, which anytime you see Jeff Probst imitate Mark Burnett, it's a funny conversation no matter what he's talking about. But the Dr. Scholl's inserts are something that he brings up. So anyway, it's funny. So the questions that Jeff is asking during this challenge, the challenge pretty much is just consisting of survival questions. One of the questions, pound for pound, what has more protein, insects or beef? Most people would probably say beef. Turns out that it's insects. So it was fun to watch this challenge because you learned a lot watching it if you're not familiar with some of these survival things. Another one of the questions were, what must be done to water inside bamboo before it's safe to drink? And it was a multiple choice thing. So he would say, I have to strain it, boil it, whatever. The answer was that you can just drink it. There's nothing wrong with it. But it was fun. It was fun to listen to this stuff and see different people's responses to the questions and what they thought were correct. The challenge ultimately comes down to Richard and Sean with a tiebreaker, and Sean wins the challenge. So Sean talks about how if he can take one person with him, he's going to bring Kelly because he's told Kelly he owes Kelly a dinner, and it really would have been smart for him to take Kelly on this breakfast. It would have kind of maybe helped to bring her to his side a little bit, which at this point is just Sean and Colleen. But if they had Kelly, they could go 3 for 3. So it could have helped to bring her over if he could be in her good graces. The next morning, Jeff shows up to pick up Sean. He's won this reward. He goes on this yacht. Jeff shows up to pick up Sean. He's allowed to invite one person for breakfast. So he's already told Kelly that he would take her. But naturally, he doesn't because that would be the smart choice to make. And he goes elsewhere. So he brings it up to Kelly like, well, I told Kelly that I would take her, but it's up to you, Kelly. And of course, she's not going to come out and be like, you better take me, you owe me. So, she's like, no, it's up to you. And then he ultimately invites Rich. Why are you inviting Rich? Rich is, if you haven't seen by now, we've seen earlier in this season, right? Sean is talking about how he thinks that there might be an alliance or might be something going on. I think there's 4 people voting together. So he thinks that there might be an alliance going on. He clearly is not paying a lot of attention because there's obviously an alliance going on. And instead of inviting the person that he might actually be able to get on his side, he invites Rich, the ringleader of the Toggy, I call it the Toggy Alliance. I don't think they had an official name, but he invites the ringleader of the Toggy Alliance. What are you doing, dude? That was his opportunity to get Kelly over to his side. He didn't capitalize on it, so he really, really dropped the ball on that one. That was just absolutely terrible. So Sean goes out on the yacht by himself, which surprised me because I thought he was going to get the opportunity to bring somebody with him, but he didn't, just for breakfast. So go back the next day, pick up that person. Sean goes out on the yacht by himself. Jeff brings him upstairs to meet the captain of the ship. Captain of the ship turns out to be his dad. So that's kind of a cool thing. Another Survivor first family visit on Survivor happens during this episode. We're on episode 11, season 1. Sean's dad comes and is on the yacht. So he gets to spend time with him. It's really cool. They bring us back. They show us the Ratana tribe. Obviously, Kelly is just pissed that she did not go on this challenge. She's just absolutely upset. Jeff shows up to camp, pick up Rich for breakfast. And it's funny, the way that he addressed him when he arrived was pretty comical because you just see Jeff in the background on the boat standing there. And Rich knows he's there for him, so he's already getting up ready to walk over. And you just hear Jeff yell, "Rich, get your skinny ass over here. Let's go." Which I thought was hilarious because it's just not something that you would probably hear from Jeff in today's Survivor. But again, this is season 1. Everybody's working it out, including Jeff. And obviously he did a fantastic job because here we are on season 40. But, it was a lot of fun to see. It was funny to see that. It was really funny. We're on the ship. Now, Rich is enjoying breakfast. Sean introduces him to his dad. And Rich is, of course, like, your dad's here? It wasn't expected by anybody. Rich is trying to just eat as much food as he can. He doesn't really want to talk unless one of those, like, don't speak until spoken to. After breakfast, they go back to the camp. Sean's dad goes back to the camp with him. So, it's the first time a family member visited camp. And he brings with him a care package. And inside it's a duffel bag, and he's got bags for each castaway. And inside they've got all sorts of things. They had like food, cards. Rudy had some weird hat. It was like this white hat with a hole in the front, and maybe it had a fan. I don't really know. I don't really know what was on the hat. It was a very strange hat. But that's what Rudy had. There's people with magazines, all sorts of things. So this really lifted the tribe spirits. especially Richard, because he got an email from one of his really good friends, and he doesn't give us a lot of context about why she would print an email to send him and why that would lift his spirit so much, but that's what it took. That's what lifted Richard Hatch during Survivor, gave him the fuel to go to the end, was this email that he got from his friend, and the email was between his friend and her husband. I have no idea. I wish I knew what it was. Richard Hatch, if you're watching this, come on our show and talk to us about that email. We want to know what was in the message. So we move on to the immunity challenge, and this is an interesting challenge because we're participating in individual immunity. And in today's individual immunity challenges, each person, when you're given a task, is going to have their own station. If it's a task where you have to stand on a beam, each person is going to have their own beam. If it's a task where you have to build something, each person has their own building station. But here we see the castaways have to stand on planks, and over a period of time, different planks will be removed. Jeff is taking them away. The last person standing gets the talisman, as Jeff likes to call it in this season, and that's it. So it was interesting that they were all on the same platform, because that could, if the person next to you gets a little wiggly and they fall down, then that could affect your chance at immunity. So I was really surprised to see that they worked it that way. But I guess probably for building it on a small budget, that's what they could do. It's definitely not the big elaborate setups that we see today. Kelly and Colleen end up being the final two on board, which is really funny because Kelly's kind of on the chopping block and doesn't know it, right? She's upset Rich and Sue because they know that she wants to flip to the other side. They don't necessarily need her anymore the way that they did before. So Kelly's on the chopping block and doesn't really know it. Colleen thinks that she's on the chopping block because she's the last remaining member of Pagong, and every person since the merge voted out has been a member of Pagong, so that makes sense. But she doesn't want to be, or she thinks that she's on the chopping block, but she's not. They don't want to vote her out. Unfortunately, she ends up being on the chopping block because Kelly wins immunity, right? So we see Kelly win immunity, which really was probably the perfect time for her. This is where she gets the Dr. Scholl's insoles. I thought it was at the last challenge. It was at this one. Here it is in my notes. I was missing a whole page of notes from the last episode, so that's got a little confusing for a minute. I watch a lot of Survivor. It's hard to keep it all straight. So anyway, we don't get to see a lot before travel started. The immunity challenge happened, and again, now today we would see them go back to camp. We would see the strategy that takes place before tribal. We would see the people who think that they're on the bottom running around scrambling, trying to get people on their side, and we don't get to see that this time. So we saw a couple of interviews. There was nothing extravagant. Sean's on the hot seat for not taking Kelly to the yacht like he had promised once they get to tribal, and Jeff states that Rich might be in the hot seat because he was in the hot seat previously, but he had immunity, so it didn't affect him. Ultimately, we see Colleen go home because Kelly has immunity, so Rich clearly isn't in the hot seat, and we as viewers know that because we see that, and we see that he's still leading the charge. And there are people who are starting to talk about the need to get him out, but nobody's pulled the trigger on it yet. Everybody's kind of waiting, so we'll see how that goes. For the trivia for this episode, episode 11, there's my episode 10 notes that I was missing for that episode. So here's our trivia. With Colleen Haskell's elimination, all the members of Pagong have been eliminated, which we already knew. So the season started off, and it was funny the way that the season started out because it went like Toggy Pagong, Toggy Pagong, Toggy Pagong for vote outs. And then after the merge happened, it was just Pagong, 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 Pagong. Because the Toggy tribe stayed, at least 4 of them stayed together and voted out. They formed that alliance before the merge, and that made the most sense for them. The other people didn't really think about doing that. When winning the first reward, Sean Kenneth became the first male in Survivor history to be allowed to bring 1 tribe mate along with him on the reward. So it was the first time we saw that in the reward challenge. And with Colleen winning the second reward, it marks the last time in Borneo that anybody other, this is a spoiler, if you don't want to know this, plug your ears. With Colleen winning the second reward, this marks the last time in Borneo that someone other than Kelly wins a challenge. Kind of cool. That is kind of cool. Let's look at episode 10. Did we miss anything big? Not really. We talked about all this stuff. So, thank you guys all for phoning in. Yeah, thanks for phoning in. I would appreciate it if you could phone in, but that's not an option. Thank you all for tuning in and watching the show tonight. If you have not already, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up for this video. Just like Survivor, as I do this series and this rewatch, I'm also learning how to do this show and how to make it better. So if you have any constructive feedback for me, leave it in the comment section. I'll be happy to read it and take it into consideration. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Hope everybody has a wonderful and safe evening. Go ahead, make sure that you follow us on Twitter at Survivor Encore. Follow Russell at Russell Hands and at This Is TRHS. Also check out our Twitter page, TRHS Sports, at TRHS Sports. It's also on YouTube. And if you're interested in getting to know Russell, look into joining our Patreon group. The link is below in the video description. Starts at $5 a month. We're a really cool group of people, and we get to do cool stuff like host videos on Russell Hantz's YouTube channel. How cool is that? So check out those things. Thank you again for tuning in tonight. I am your host, Cody, and I will see you on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern when we will do the final 2 episodes and the finale show of Survivor Borneo before we start working on Survivor Australia. Have a good night, everybody.